Good morning. I'm here today as the strictly unpaid Executive Director of GMO for USA, a public interest nonprofit and pro-science organization. We fully support responsible science and advocate for the precautionary principle. I'm here as a concerned parent and as one of 4 members of a family with digestive and other chronic health problems. Through cancer lawsuits brought by people who have developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma after exposure to Monsanto's Roundup herbicide, the world has gotten an up-close and personal look at the corrupt and unethical culture of the Monsanto company. The recent release of explosive internal emails and documents, dubbed the Monsanto Papers, has proven that biotech giant Monsanto has displayed a long list of corrupt and unethical behaviors. The company has used inadequate and manipulated scientific studies to prove the safety of its products, has ghost-written studies and articles for scientists who were presented as independent, used front groups portrayed as independent, bullied scientists, employed an army of internet trolls to leave no comments unanswered, and has covered up concerns of carcinogenicity and genotoxicity of its glyphosate-based herbicides, all in the interest of gaining regulatory approval for unsafe products. Even Monsanto toxicologist Donna Farmer was caught in an email saying, "You cannot say that Roundup is not a carcinogen. We have not done the necessary testing on the formulation to make that statement. Nor has the company done the necessary testing on any of its genetically engineered foods to be able to prove they are safe for long-term human consumption." The company has recently been banned from entering the European Parliament after refusing to attend a hearing into allegations of regulatory interference. This is a company that puts corporate wealth before public health. This is not a company that we can trust to do adequate and unbiased safety studies of novel foods created in their laboratories. It's time for US regulators to stop turning a blind eye. Let's look at some documented examples of this corruption as it relates to the genetically engineered foods currently approved and in our food supply. This is an industry that rushes their products to market with only 90-day animal feeding studies that are classified as trade secrets to protect them from the scrutiny of independent scientists. In 2006, a lawsuit by an NGO resulted in the forced release of a Monsanto 90-day GMO rat feeding study by an appeal court in Germany. A new analysis of the data from this study was published in the peer-reviewed journal Archives of Environmental Contamination and Toxicology in 2007. The study documented signs of liver and kidney damage, causing the researchers to conclude, with the present data, it cannot be concluded that GM corn MON 863 is a safe product. Let's look at the review article titled Prevalence and Impacts of Genetically Engineered Feedstocks on Livestock Populations by former Monsanto employee Alison Van Eenenam, published in 2014 in a journal with a Monsanto employee on the Scientific Advisory Committee on Biotechnology. This review has been widely touted by industry as proof of safety after 100 billion animals were fed GMO feed with no harmful effects. A closer look disturbingly finds that nearly 95% of the animals under review were broiler chickens, which would live for at least 5 years, but were only fed GMOs during their limited commercial lifetimes, on average for the 47 days up until slaughter. Seriously, how many chickens are there in the audience? This review is based on animal production data, which looks at days to market, feed efficiency, percent mortality, and carcass weight, and does not study health parameters. You have to be absolutely insane to think that this pseudoscience is proof of safety. The basis of the FDA's GMO approvals is the concept of substantial equivalence, meaning that the GMO is presumed to be compositionally the same as the non-GMO counterpart. A recent study published in the journal Nature used multiomics to analyze Monsanto's NK603 Roundup Ready GMO corn and compare it to its non-GMO counterpart grown side by side under identical conditions. A total of 117 proteins and 91 small molecule biochemicals were found to be significantly altered in the Monsanto corn, unintended effects of the GM transformation process. The lead author was quoted saying that the GM transformation resulted in worryingly large increases of putrescine and butadiene, which can produce various toxic effects. The authors concluded, our molecular profiling results show that NK603 and its isogenic control are not substantially equivalent. In the EU, the London Times published an article titled, Millions Face Health Risk from Toxic GM Crop. The problems here are not limited to Monsanto. Most, if not all, pre- and post-market safety studies conducted by biotech companies and sent to regulators use laboratory animal diets fed to the control groups that also contain GMO ingredients. In a study published in the peer-reviewed journal PLOS ONE, conducted by independent researchers, they observed that the standard laboratory control diet almost always contains significant amounts of Roundup-ready soy and corn and BT corn. Thus, in these safety studies, both the control group and the test group are fed GMO ingredients, which makes both the results of those studies and the historical data used to represent so-called baseline incidence of disease unreliable. Our nonprofit organization examined the health studies from 1993 to 2014 as listed in an article published in the journal Nature Biotechnology, written by Miguel Sanchez, who is funded by the biotech industry. What we found were numerous omissions. When we include all peer-reviewed studies during that period, adding in those omitted, 76.2% of the animal health studies using rodents and pigs fed Roundup-ready soy observed potential and actual adverse health effects. That's more than 3/4 of the studies on the most used genetically engineered crop in the US. These are studies using pigs and rodents, which are some of the most comparable animals to humans, not chickens. The damage reported in these studies includes, but is not limited to, disturbance in the pancreas, liver, kidneys, adrenal glands, thymus, ovaries, and testes, reproductive issues such as lower birth weight and increased mortality of offspring, and the functioning of the digestive system. One study, published in the journal Animal Breeding and Genetics, which resulted in stillborn piglets in the GM soy-fed group, caused the researchers to conclude the use of GM crops in food for children, adolescents, and young people should be prohibited. In fact, several countries have banned the use of GMOs in infant formulas and baby foods. When we examined the studies which did not claim to observe adverse effects, we found that they were all fundamentally flawed. In nearly all of these studies, only a limited number of health parameters were examined. For example, one study only looked at the aortic valve of rats. This tells us nothing about what's going on in the liver, kidneys, etc. It's equivalent to a physician giving you a clean bill of health after doing only an MRI of your big toe. In 2016, the National Academy of Sciences published a report on GMOs. Aside from evidence that members of the committee that wrote the paper had undeclared conflicts of interest, we determined that the NAS report had the same flaw of omitting dozens of studies. Groups such as the NAS, however, represent a minority. On our website, we list over 300 independent medical, public health, and science groups that question the safety of GMOs. These groups represent the overwhelming majority of such groups from around the world. The surveys of physicians and other members of the public health community also consistently show that health professionals either regard GMO foods currently on the market as unsafe or state there is not enough evidence to claim safety. In 1957, researchers including Dr. Fred Kumarow presented evidence of harm from artificial trans fat in the journal Science. Dr. Kumarow continued his research on trans fats into the 1970s. Yet in 1976, the FDA considered trans fats generally recognized as safe for human consumption. It was not until 2015, almost 40 years later, that the FDA determined artificial trans fat is not generally recognized as safe. At that time, FDA's acting commissioner, Stephen Ostroff, MD, said, "This action is expected to reduce coronary heart disease and prevent thousands of fatal heart attacks every year. Please, don't make another mistake like those made with artificial trans fat." The science of genetics is in its infancy. There is far more to be learned than is currently understood. Genetic engineering technologies are based on the outdated notion of one gene per protein. There is now ample evidence that the GMOs currently on the market are unsafe. This $3 million of taxpayer dollars should be spent to evaluate independent safety studies and do further research so thousands of lives aren't lost like they were with artificial trans fat. It's outrageous that the FDA plans to spend any money at all to promote an industry that spent over $100 million, $46 million plus in the state of California alone to fight state-level GMO labeling. It is not the role of the FDA to promote industry. The FDA is responsible for promoting and protecting public health by assuring the safety, efficacy, and security of our nation's food supply. Please do your job. Thank you.
Any questions from the